Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our students, our faculty, staff, our alumni who are here, and our trustees, and our distinguished guests. It is my distinct privilege to welcome you to Urgent Witness, Why the Arts Matter for Democracy, which will serve as both the Betsy Wood Knapp Class of '64 lecture in the social sciences and the Caroline A. Wilson Class of '10 lecture, two of the college's premier lectures. We are so fortunate this evening to be joined by Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation, in dialogue with Emily Wei Rales, Class of '98, director and co-founder and chief curator of the Glenstone Museum and Foundation, both of whom I'll introduce in a moment. First, my thanks to the Knapp Center for the Social Sciences and to Jenny Musto, Associate Professor of Women and Gender Studies and Faculty Director of the Knapp Center, and to all of those who helped make tonight possible. And of course, to the Knapp Family Foundation for their generous contribution to the Knapp Center and this lecture. And my deep thanks to Pat Berman, the Theodora L. and Stanley H. Feldberg Professor of Art, who was especially instrumental in helping us conceive of and plan this event. Tonight's topic, the critical role that the arts play in a healthy democracy, could not be more relevant. We face the indiscriminate and sometimes and seemingly punitive defunding of higher education, defunding of the arts and humanities, along with threats to academic freedom and a chilling of free expression so crucial to the thriving of the arts. We have watched growing division and a coarsening of civil society, one that often rejects compassionate understanding of others, especially of those who are marginalized or different, or those who feel deeply and see the world for what it could be, our artists, our creators, our thinkers, our innovators. As one of the leading liberal arts colleges, we have a responsibility to educate the kinds of engaged citizens who understand that exposure to the arts generates more empathy, an understanding of difference, and a greater sense of shared community. As Darren, you have wisely said many times. And I believe that this evening is part of that work, and I'm grateful to be part of a community committed to it. With that, let me introduce our speakers. A recent Harper's Bazaar profile praised Darren Walker for his legacy of reimagining the Ford Foundation's mission around fighting inequality, strengthening democracy, and championing the arts as a force for justice. Darren has led the Ford Foundation in international social justice philanthropy for the last 12 years. Over this tenure, Ford's endowment grew from just over $11 billion to just under $17 billion. And under his leadership, it became the first nonprofit in the U.S.'s history to issue a $1 billion social bond to stabilize nonprofit organizations in the wake of the COVID pandemic. He also redirected much of the foundation's efforts to addressing inequality and divested the fund from fossil fuels and the for-profit prison industry. Among his many successes, he chaired the philanthropy committee that brought a resolution to the city of Detroit's historic bankruptcy. Darren's career in philanthropy and in the cultural nonprofit arena goes back for decades. Prior to his role, he was the vice president at the Rockefeller Foundation, overseeing global and domestic programs, including the Rebuild New Orleans initiative after Hurricane Katrina. And in the 1990s, he was the chief operating officer at the Abyssinian Development Corporation, Harlem's largest community development organization. His service to the nation and to the arts is significant. He co-founded both the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance and the President's Council on Disability Inclusion in Philanthropy. He's the president of the board of the National Gallery of Art and is on the boards of Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, the Obama Foundation, and the Clooney Foundation for Justice. We won't ask, I know, Darren, I'm not going to ask you, do you get sleep? Because of course you get sleep. We all need sleep. He is the recipient of 16, yes, 16 honorary degrees, including Harvard University's W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. Darren has received too many honors to name, but they include France's highest cultural honor for leadership in the arts, the appointment by Queen Elizabeth II to the Order of the British Empire for services to the US-UK relations, and the National Humanities Medal by President Joseph Biden. He's the author of 2 books, From Generosity to Justice, published in 2016, and The Idea of America, Reflections on Inequality and Democracy, published just last month. Raised by a single mother and educated exclusively in public schools, Darren was a member of the first Head Start class in 1965 and received his BA, BS, and JD degrees from UT Austin. As Harper's profile notes, his departure from the Ford Foundation brings him back to the beginning, because public programs like Head Start was one of the Ford Foundation's earliest grantees, and scholarships, Pell Grants, and the generosity of mentors carried him further still, instilling in him a conviction that institutions and philanthropy can serve as engines of hope. Darren, we are so honored to have you here with us tonight. Next, I'm pleased and so proud to introduce Emily Wei Rales, Wellesley College class of 1998, director and co-founder of Glenstone, a museum and foundation that integrates art, architecture, and nature. Emily established Glenstone in 2006 with her husband, Mitchell Rales, to house an extensive collection of post-war and contemporary art, including monumental outdoor sculptures situated on 360 acres. Earl A. Powell III, a former director of the National Gallery of Art, has called the Raleses the paramount collectors of their generation. In her role, Emily works directly with artists and their collaborators on planning exhibitions and publications. Welcoming 130,000 visitors annually, Glenstone has garnered an impressive and lasting reputation, not simply for its collection, but for its unique visitor experience, which encourages slow and contemplative engagement and has, as Emily said, a vehicle for greater civility in our public conversation. As author and architecture critic Paul Goldberger notes, this approach created by the Raleses at Glenstone has the reputation within the art world as a place that treats contemporary art with the gravitas of an academic institution. Emily served on the Advisory Council for the National Museum of African American History, serves on the Advisory Council for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the board of the Foundation for Contemporary Arts, an artist-funded and artist-led organization that sponsors and promotes innovative works in the arts. In addition to her Wellesley degrees, Emily holds an honorary doctorate from the Maryland Institute College of the Arts. In an interview, Emily said, "What if students made art as central to their learning as they did math and English? What if we could truly integrate all these different disciplines rather than siloing them so that everyone comes out with a liberal arts education, which I credit as having given me the cognitive flexibility to take on all these things that I've done in my life." Emily, I truly love this, and I hope that Wellesley will fulfill this really important vision as we execute the college's vision for the arts. I'm so glad that Wellesley prepared you for a lifetime of civic engagement, stewardship, and connection. We are so honored to have you back on campus. So I began my remarks with a litany of challenges we face. But I want to end on a note of hope, which I feel is in short supply these days. Hope, after all, is the business of higher education, to educate and prepare those who will make a better future for us all. I see a reason for hope especially clearly this year, a historic anniversary for Wellesley. 150 years ago, our founders, Pauline and Henry Durant, began an experiment, really radical for its time. They believed that educating women of all economic backgrounds would make active participants in building the country and addressing social challenges. We remain committed to that spirit. It drives us to meet this moment and to imagine what must yet be done, strengthened by the power of the arts, collaboration, and community. Emily has declared that art gives you a license to dream, and Darren believes that hope is the oxygen of democracy. It is at that intersection of art and democracy that we will explore here tonight. With that, again, it is truly an honor to have these two great leaders here to inspire us and guide us. So please help me welcome again Emily Wei Rales and Darren Walker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paula. It is just thrilling to be on this campus. It's my first visit to this mythical place I've heard women talk about for years. And of course, when my dear Emily called and said she and Paula were cooking up a scheme for me to come, how do you turn Emily Wei Rales and Paula Johnson down? So here I am. I'm so happy to be here and so grateful that you turned out. And Emily, I really want us to have a conversation, as we've discussed. I'm not good with scripts, and I like to go off script. So
that makes two of us.
So you're so proud of Wellesley. You talk about Wellesley all the time, and it is clearly deeply ingrained into who you are and your own identity, which is so connected to this institution, to something that you have built with Mitch and Glenstone. And how did this place called Wellesley impact you in that way of like getting to a point where it wasn't just that Glenstone had to be a house museum or something. You had a point of view, and you were very young. And so how did that come to be you to be you, and Glenstone to be Glenstone in the way it is?
Oh, Darren, thank you for that question. And I just also want to echo how proud I am to be here. I never dreamed when I was a student at Wellesley that I would be on stage addressing other people, and people will want to hear from me and my experience. And I kind of have to have a pinch me moment that I'm sitting here not only talking to all of you, but to the great Darren Walker, my friend, and someone I look up to. So it's really such a privilege. Wellesley is a very special place to me. I came in my first year thinking I would be pre-law or pre-med, because that's what my parents told me I should do. And my first year, I was encouraged to take all kinds of classes, because that's what we do here at Wellesley. That's what a liberal arts education encourages. And I happened to look through the course catalog, and I saw that there was an art history class taught by Professor Pat Berman. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about art history, but I can take this and see what happens. And when I tell you lightning struck that semester and I've never looked back, it would be an understatement. I suddenly saw the world open up in different ways. And it's not that I became an art aficionado or an art expert overnight. It's that I saw that there was another way to look at history through the lens of art. And that was what was so remarkable and revelatory. I also took other things at Wellesley, Asian American diasporic studies, French cinema, it just ran the gamut. And I couldn't believe that there was a place that honored curiosity in this way. And that is something I've taken with me all these years.
And how do you think about, because you were, when we were back in the green room, you were saying how the thing you loved about Wellesley is, unlike other colleges, it is so in sync with and organically integrated into the landscape in a way in which most universities are not. I was just at Cambridge for a wedding, and there are no trees in Cambridge or Oxford. I mean, there are no trees. They're just big, imposing buildings that say, we're rich, and this place is powerful, which then the Americans copied. And so when you go to the great American universities, you see, or at least in the East, you see big, imposing buildings and not a lot of landscape. You see trees here and there and some gardens, but for the most part, it's an architectural monument to power and education and all of that. But this is very different, this place, and it is also the way Glenstone is.
Yeah, I think that's a coincidence. I did not at the time think, well, this is something I would like to bring to my future.
No one, when they're a student, says, I think I'll build a museum one day, and I too will have an escape with it. I mean, no.
No. But in hindsight, yes, there's something very special about being here, having the lake, right next to your dorm, being able to meander through the campus. And I was speaking earlier to some people here about how it is really a lovely experience to navigate all of these pastoral corners, but it's hard to get to class on time because there's no straight lines, and but that's kind of a lovely thing, to be invited to get lost. I mean, when do we ever get to do that? So I think it's a very beautiful place to contemplate. It's in those moments between things that we get to get out of our comfort zone and maybe stumble upon something we've never seen before. And that's something that I'd like to also offer to our visitors at Glenstone Museum.
And how do you, when you talk about art is essential to civilization, this notion that without art we really can't have civilization? Explain how you interpret that and what you mean by those words.
Well, Paula just said that I like to say art is a license to dream. And I think you might have said that once before, so I was quoting you when I said that. But I believe that art is, well, what is art really? Art is metaphor, right? And what is metaphor? It's about seeing two things that are disparate, that might not have anything to do with each other, but because we are human, because we have imaginations, we can imagine and we can visualize and we can bring ourselves into a different reality. That is a very unique skill that human imagination can have. And so when art opens our hearts and our minds up to metaphor, it also allows us to see possibility in our current reality. Because what gets us from here to a different world is imagination. And you've talked about this too. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Why do you think art is important to our civilization?
Well, I think art is essential, as Paula and the research make clear, to developing capability for empathy, for an ability to see the humanity in others, for a willingness to understand or begin to have the skills to understand and analyze in ways that are really meaningful in terms of life experiences. And I think the empathy part of it for me is essential, especially during a time when some in power would say that empathy is not a an admirable trait in leaders. I believe empathy is essential because without empathy, we really can't be a just nation. You can't have, if you have a citizenry who lack empathy, that means people become indifferent to human suffering and unwilling to look at and accept things that may make them uncomfortable. And so we really can't be the kind of nation we need to be without empathy. And we're not going to, the way to get to empathy is through the arts. And so for me, that connection is really clear. And, you know, there are occasions when I might see leaders who use deeply troubling terms when they speak of other human beings in ways that are degrading, dehumanizing. And I often think that is a leader who has certainly not experienced the beauty of sitting in front of Manet's Olympia and engaging in that picture and what is in it. Or sitting through a production of Twelfth Night and understanding the power of comedy and tragedy, or reading a beautiful poem. No one who has been exposed, embraced, and internalized what the arts are about and can do for us would ever use that kind of language to describe another living human being. And so we need the arts to help our leaders, to help develop leaders who can lead us with empathy and humility and help us to understand, which we need in this country desperately. And so I'm a deep believer that without the arts, America can't be America.
Can you tell me an example of how art made you more empathic? Maybe like a
Sure. I think art, for me, as you know, we've known each other a long time. I didn't grow up with the arts. I grew up, I'm a single mom. I never knew my father. It's not like I went to a museum or experienced a production until I was in college. But I did, because my grandmother was a maid for a family, and they went to a lot of theater and things, and they used to leave in their mudroom, and my grandmother, my grandfather who worked for them would, pack everything up, and I would have them bring me home programs, and from, the Houston Ballet or the Alley Theater. This was in Texas where they lived. And I would look through those programs and I would just marvel. We lived in a little shotgun house on a dirt road in rural Texas, but I would look through those and they just sparked my imagination. And when I got to college, I was very lucky because I was head of our student union and we did a lot of programming and I was exposed to a lot because we brought, the first time I saw Dance Theater of Harlem was in Austin, Texas. The first time I saw Alvin Ailey, the first time I saw a Broadway production was, in Austin, Texas in 1979. And it just completely blew my head up and became for me a real avocation, not a vocation, to be really clear. I was very clear. When you grow up poor, one of the things you resolve as an adult is to never be poor again. So I was very clear that what I was doing, I was going to Wall Street, but I knew ultimately that I wanted to have a connection to the arts. Yeah, and it happened. And it happened in part because we were talking about this earlier, because you and I do a lot of talks like this, and one of the things that happens is that we want to give the message to young people who look at us and say, oh my goodness, I could never be you, or I could, and it's so not true, even though it is hard today for young people. I see it. I talk to young, all the time, and it is hard. But the things that are consistent, that are non-negotiable, you have to have a work ethic. You cannot, if you're not willing to do that, and I say this to my young colleagues at Ford all the time, who are, I understand, we want to talk about work-life balance. Okay, we're going to talk about it. But sometimes that balance gets thrown off. Yeah. And you have to monitor it, but you can't be ideological about it, right? In the sense that I just won't do that. Again, I am of a generation that we did whatever it took. Yeah. You worked weekends, you worked around the clock, you worked whatever, and never questioned it. The world has changed, but you still have to have that work ethic.
Yeah, and I think kind of embedded in that work ethic is optimism, right? Why work if you don't believe that there can be something better, right? And we started out this conversation talking about hope. So what would be your answer to a recent graduate or someone about to graduate? Oh, I just don't have enough hope. I don't have enough optimism. The world has a lot of problems. How would you counsel that person?
I mean, it's really interesting because I was in London a few days ago, and this was a question, and when I got this award, and it was like, well, why should you be hopeful? And it is true. There are all these things that are wrong in the world. There are so many problems, and it is so easy to be overwhelmed. But for my generation and for the next generation, I just think about what it took to get me here. I mean, if I were a 20-year-old black gay man at whatever school, or gay woman at Wellesley or wherever, and to say I don't have any hope, like, look at what it took to get us here. Like, I came from London. I mean, my ancestors did not cross the Atlantic the way I did in a flatbed seat. They did not. Throughout history, my ancestors gave so much with a vision that, when I think about Fannie Lou Hamer walking the dirt roads in Mississippi and being beaten and spat upon and dehumanized, and she continued to carry that flag. I think about Langston Hughes or James Baldwin, my black gay icons, and that they never had the dignity that I have. And so when I think about, whoa, I'm just hopeless, woe is me. I mean, just imagine being Langston Hughes in Harlem in the 1930s and living a life completely marginalized and feeling completely dispossessed by your country because you are black and gay. And yet he writes, one of his greatest, he writes, let America be America again. His great, in the first stanza, let America be America again. America never was America to me. He is expressing his rage and anger at this country and his status in it. And yet he ends the final stanza. But oh, yes, one day America will be. This man is saying, I believe that it's possible. I actually have hope. And so as I sit here, or when I talk to young people at commencements from all these sort of prestigious schools who are saying to me, when I meet with the LGBT graduates and their parents or the black graduates or whatever, and they're like, it's just really hard. It is very difficult. Do you know how much of a head start you have? Do you know?
Yeah.
Like, this is no time for woe is me, because so many people without our privileges, without our degrees, without our credentials, did so much with the hopes that we would continue to do so much. So for me, Langston Hughes is speaking to me every day, because he couldn't imagine having a husband, much less walking down the street holding hands with him in New York City, right? And so, no, I'm not going to. Hope is a radical response in a moment like this. So that's the only thing I know.
I love that, and it's also about gratitude. Like, we can be critical, but we can temper that with gratitude for where we are today, and we have a lot to be grateful for.
No, absolutely. But do you feel, as you travel, because you travel a lot and you see a lot, do you feel as a kind of arts patron that you are seeing a next generation of young people who are like you when you were at Wellesley, all excited you were leaving and you were going to link? Do you find that, and what do you say to them as they just think, well, my gosh, it's hard being an art history major. It's hard thinking about being a curator. There are no more rent control apartments in New York. I mean, how do you?
No, it's really hard because it's both generational and both just a symptom of being young. I remember at the time when I just graduated, I was very eager and impatient to get somewhere. Now, with the hindsight that I have, I realize that every little thing that I did, every failure, every left turn, happened for a reason, because it's important to fail.
And how did you experience that when you say, fail or wrong turn? How did that turn up in your life?
Well, so the first career move I did was I worked for an art gallery with objects. It was a Chinese antiquities gallery, and it was a lovely, beautiful place called J.J. Lally and Company. And what we did was we sold ancient objects, so ceramic figures, bronzes, Ming vases, all these gorgeous things, sometimes Neolithic artifacts, and these were stunning objects that we would find in Hong Kong and other places and bring them to, rich patrons in America. And some of them would end up at the Metropolitan. Some of them would end up at the Asia Society. On my first day at work, one of the things that we did was we went over to the Asia Society to appraise the Rockefeller collection of ceramics. So imagine me, I'm 22, I show up at the top level of the Asia Society, and I'm handling Qing, dynasty, priceless ceramics, and it was kind of like a dream come true for someone who had studied art history and Chinese studies at the same time. So it was kind of amazing, but I thirsted for something more. I wanted to be part of the art making and visioning process, and I can only do that when I'm working with artists. So I took a complete 180 and left that pretty plum job as the gallery manager on Madison Avenue and 41st Street, and I started working at the front desk at the Barbara Gladstone Gallery on 24th Street.
A great gallery.
Great gallerist,
Dear Barbara,
who we just lost recently. But it was important for me to have tried something and then decided, that's not for me. I'd like to do something a little different. But I don't regret that. And so we need these opportunities to refine our preferences and to teach us things about ourselves. And I never would have known that had I, not tried that at that time. So we all need to experiment.
and be open to failure.
And be open to
I mean,
failure.
it's not just making the wrong decision about or making a U-turn or whatever. It's saying, I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
I'm not meant to be.
You know what I'm really bad at is selling art. Terrible. And I worked at galleries. I mean, I was awful because if somebody didn't want to buy something, it's like, okay, don't. I can't convince you. Like, why would, don't buy it.
Right. No, and that is this is why you lead a nonprofit gallery.
There you go.
Because, right, I mean, that's not what you feel you are proficient or you want to be proficient at.
Right, right.
And I think that part of it, I mean, for me, I hated the law, and working in the kind of investment banking world was okay, because if you're sufficiently proficient, you can actually make a good living, right? But I was so ungratified by the work. I had no satisfaction. I mean, obviously, at bonus time, that was but you knew while you were there.
Yeah.
I mean, you did. But at the end of the day, you're not happy. And I think this is one of the things about the arts that I do love, is there is something happy-making about being in the space of the arts. And for me, that's just so essential to how I want to live my life, and part of it, I mean, when I moved to New York, I thought I would be in New York for a period of time, like a lot of people from places like Texas. And then I met this amazing man, and I fell in love, and he was an art dealer, and you know the story. And so I found myself, I guess I'm going to be in New York forever. But I wasn't really happy until I left Wall Street and started and moved to Harlem and started doing the work that I was really meant to do, and how I got to Rockefeller but I never wanted a career in philanthropy. I still don't want a career in philanthropy.
Well, you're getting out now.
Exactly, it's a little too late. Yeah. No, but I was excited because in philanthropy, the things that I cared about, I could have an impact on. Right? And so when I was working on housing and community development in Harlem and was hired at Rockefeller to do that nationally, it was great because it meant I got to scale up what I was doing, on 138th Street in Harlem. And when I came to Ford, it was the same thing. It's just that I think in philanthropy, and particularly in arts patronage, which we should talk about in our last 5 minutes, we leave a lot on the table.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, we who are funding the arts don't take enough risk.
Yeah.
We don't invest enough in artists. We overinvest in already wealthy institutions. And when we invest in those institutions, we're not always willing to do the disruptive investment. I mean, to invest. I mean, we have invested in big institutions. I mean, we've made grants to the Met and to MoMA, but those were all for exhibitions that were hard exhibitions for those institutions. And
you mean hard as in budget-wise?
Budget-wise,
yeah.
and so, doing Harlem on My Mind again at the Met was fraught. It was fraught because they messed it up so much when they did it the first time. And so now everybody was on, everybody, the board, Max, and they had a black curator.
Yes.
They never, right.
Thank you very much.
No,
yeah,
but and so it was important to support that exhibition. It was important for the Ford Foundation to signal that this was important, and that and it was important for us because there was a black curator who they never had doing that kind of a monumental exhibition, and she had to succeed. But because she's excellent and amazing and all of that, it's not like she needed coaching. She knew exactly what she was doing. She just needed, like all curators, to have patrons supporting her work. And there aren't many black curators who can say that, because we all know that a lot of museum curators and directors have been advanced because patrons supported their work. And so I think we could do such a better job. And, you know, with the loss of our dear Agnes Gund
Yes.
and Leonard Lauder,
Yes.
you know, it is a huge loss for the idea of arts patronage, because they were so radical.
And this is so good to talk about, because I don't think the general audience, the general public, doesn't understand how arts patronage works. I mean, there are powerful people who sit on the boards of these institutions, who help fund a lot of the institutions, but you know, some of the interests and the politics are played out in the boardroom and nobody knows about what's happening. But luckily there's more of an enlightened sense now that, you know, what you fund at museums needs to reflect the kinds of audiences that you're serving. So a great example would be, you know, in the wake of Black Lives Matter, you see a lot more Black and brown artists on the walls of museums, which was high time that that happened. But more of that certainly needs to you know, be supported over time. Yeah.
So we are going to go to questions. We have a few minutes. If there are any questions, probably for Emily Wei Rales, but if there are any questions, we have mics at both of the aisles here, and we welcome any questions. Thank you for being the first.
Yes.
It's never easy. Thank you for being brave and courageous, for stepping forward.
Thank you so much. This is such an interesting conversation, and I'm just really thrilled to welcome you here. Here's a question I wanted to ask. I did my undergraduate degree in the arts because I saw this connection between the arts and social change and impact. And I had this incredible opportunity after I graduated from college to spend a year in Moscow, in Russia. And I spent that year going to theater and to ballet, where the Russians have this extraordinary tradition of the arts. And one of the things that I found so fascinating was you would go to a theater production, you know, and there were censors, right? There were only certain things you could say. But the audiences understood these little signals and clues. And I'm just wondering, you know, here in this country, how do we educate you know, theater goers or, you know, folks who are consuming art about this power of what the arts can do for social change?
I think it's really interesting when you look at other cultures and societies. So in a place like Russia or Italy or France, in that theater, I don't know if you were at a ballet, the Minskoff or some, the Bolshoi, there were middle-class people in that audience. There were working-class Russians in that audience, just as in Italy or France, because they value their culture. They know that it is an asset, and it is culturally deeply ingrained in their society. We have a challenge in America that is partly our own doing. Culture, as we in the 1950s and 60s began to really aggressively bring it was introduced in a very elitist way. So, symphony, opera, ballet were introduced in a way that generated exclusion and classism, and racism, but most importantly, and so we never got to having the kind of engagement of everyday working Americans as much as we should. It's not as if it didn't. We had arts education, we had things that, but we allowed these things to be stratified unnecessarily in ways that separated us and that made audiences look very different than they do in Europe. And we're still dealing with that. And there was a move early in the 1960s, and Ford Foundation was involved in this, to get the Metropolitan Opera to have subtitles. They didn't want subtitles. The patrons of the Metropolitan Opera didn't want subtitles. Now, to my mind, subtitling would have made opera more accessible, because that was the whole argument. Subtitling would make opera more accessible. That's why New York City Opera was created, in fact, in part as a response to the Met's elitism and lack of innovation, because the Met only wanted to do retreaded things. Wagnerian rings and things. They weren't generating new American commissions. So my point is, that's the challenge that we need to acknowledge and take on. And it's why today, when the average American, when you say to in our country, the NEA is going out of business. Like, the average American is like, how does that affect my life? You would never have that in a European country, or even in Russia today. So,
Hi, my name
we got
is
2 questions. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Juliet, and as a student at Wellesley, I sometimes feel that my expectations for myself or my goals for myself seem too otherworldly to achieve, and I was wondering how, for either one of you, I was wondering how you sort of been able to physically form your goals and be able to manifest them into what you are today.
That's a great question. It's a great question. And we were just talking about this earlier, and I think, I'll just speak for myself, and Darren, you can chime in later, but I didn't start out my career with a master plan, with a strategic plan with sections and chapters, and I didn't just follow that. It's life is truly an adventure, and we talked about failure before, and doors open when another one closes. And so I think that it's a matter of trial and error and seeing what sticks, what doesn't. You might have a perfectly formed idea in your head about what you want to manifest for yourself, and that might turn out to be something completely different, because what's theory is completely different from practice. And here in this wonderful place called Wellesley, you're dealing with a lot of theory and a lot of case studies, but they're not actually in the real world doing their thing, right? And you're not actually participating in it. So once you're in the stream of life and meeting people and seeing things that might be interesting to you, the thing is to stay curious and to stay open-minded. One thing that I would say Wellesley offered for me is not dates and art movements and the ability to draw in 2 dimensions, which I took as my studio art class. It was a sort of rigor with how to think about things. Wellesley taught me how to write. Wellesley taught me how to construct an argument. These are things that you will take with you no matter what you do, whether you're going to be on Wall Street or in nonprofit, whether you work as a social worker, whether you become a doctor, any of those things. It teaches you how to think critically about anything, from any sort of phenomenon that you'll come across. So I would say, don't worry about it. Take it easy. Enjoy the process. You're only young once, right? Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Final question here.
Hi, I'll make my question brief so you can expand, time willing. But I'm just wondering what your wildest dreams are for the art world, and how you would advise young art professionals going into it, what specifically you would implore them to do.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's a great question.
These young people are so smart. They ask such good, hard questions.
Okay, yeah.
Oh. Well, I'm Lillian Goins. I'm class of 2026.
Thank you, Lillian. My wildest dream for the art world is that it becomes unyoked from the capitalist system. So the art that I often see coming out of art schools and coming out of galleries is very informed by what might sell in the art market. And because it's all part of the same ecosystem, what's in a gallery ends up in a museum, ends up on the patrons' walls, ends up, you know, inspiring a young artist. There's a kind of like flattening of aesthetics that's happening, and it's really, I think, also accelerated by social media, because that's all we see is the same kind of thing that is clickbait, right? And so this is a very insidious trend that I'm seeing in the style of art that is happening. And it's all because money is driving everything, right? Is it easier to sell a painting, or is it easier to sell a giant bronze? Well, obviously the painting is gonna fly off the walls much faster. And so what would happen if artists could just create, or go into the community and do collaborative work with young artists or students, and that could be an artwork in and of itself. Some artists do have the conviction to do such things, like my friend LaToya Ruby Frazier, who's an amazing artist, and she continually goes into communities to document the lives of people who are just wanting to, you know, support themselves or each other. And that's what I would love to see for the art world. What about you, Darren?
I think that is a beautiful, beautiful summary of both the diagnosis and the hope. So it's a great answer. I can't add anything further. I just want to say thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Paula, we have, the president has taken my.
I'm going to take the prerogative, both Emily and Darren. I do, first of all, I just want to thank our students and thank you for asking the questions. They're really important for us to hear. At this moment, I would love for you, just as an ending, we've just talked about the hope for the future, what you hope to see, Emily. We're also living in a time where so many basic freedoms and support are being challenged, suppressed, taken away. What is the role of art in today's society when our very fabric of democracy is being challenged? What is the role of artists to keep them moving forward? And how do you see your roles in that?
Well, I see art as not simply the visual arts, but as the performing arts. It's music, it is literature, it is, you know, hip hop. I mean, the whole range of creative production, I think, falls within this category. And I believe that art has a responsibility to bear witness to this moment, both the positive and the negative. We saw during COVID artists documenting, you know, the hardship and the grief and the loss that pandemic, you know, wreaked on our society. And I still think that we're recovering from that time, and artists are still metabolizing all of it, you know, and digesting it and producing work as a kind of therapeutic, you know, way to move forward. So, and when that happens, I think this is the expression of our humanity, is when we speak about, when we tell stories about what we're going through. And in that moment of telling a story, like Faith Ringgold did with her amazing children's books, or her quilts that talked about, you know, her life as a young girl growing up in Harlem, as you reach across different geographic lines, different class lines, to then maybe touch someone else's heart who you otherwise wouldn't have touched. And this goes back to empathy. In a way, it's not these big issues. It's not, you know, climate change. It's not the Supreme Court. It's not this or that. It's about humanity. It's about our spiritual existence as, embodied people and how we relate to one another. So it's very basic, and I would dare say it's not even an American issue. It's about talking across different borders, right? And that's kind of the privilege that I have when I get to travel to different places and I can talk to someone from a different culture and background about something that is as moving as a work of art. It's a very powerful bridge. So I might have nothing in common with you, but we both happen to love an abstract painting by Ellsworth Kelly. And it's a form of diplomacy, actually, across borders. And we both are affiliated with a wonderful organization called FAPE that commissions and presents artworks in different places around the world. So I think it's a way to capture this generosity of spirit and to not hoard it, but to share it.
I would say that this is why we need artists, the diagnosis that you've just given of our current condition. Artists always, throughout time, and certainly throughout American history, and most certainly modern American history, have played an essential and critical role in demanding that our country look at itself. Artists have a way of holding the mirror up and saying to America, look at yourself. Are you who you say you are? And we can look over the time of social change and progress, whether it was the women's movement, whether it was the civil rights movement, the movement for LGBT and marriage equality, etc. Artists were essential in those movements for social progress. And because artists are more brave and courageous than most of us, because they refuse to be constrained, many of them, by conformity, by towing the line, if you will. And it's why we have to invest in artists. It's why one of our largest initiatives at the Ford Foundation is supporting U.S. artists, a $50,000 unrestricted grant to artists to do whatever you want, but to do something as an artist, because we desperately need their voices and we desperately need their courage and bravery. And so for me, it's about investing in artists. And if we invest in artists, everything else will be okay. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much.